we live in a culture right now where like your output is what you're judged on and not the thought that goes into it. And I think that's something I know really stresses me out. Even today with work, I was like reading a newsletter based on my industry, based on research, and this is very helpful for me to do but I felt guilty because I'm sitting there for, a half an hour reading this newsletter, even though it's going to empower the decisions I make because I'm not actually outputting anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it's not just me that feels that way because I have people I know that are the same way.
Oh, I mean, relating that back to my field, like there's some days I work in a hospital. So on the days I don't have like scheduled patients, I'm doing consults in the hospital, rounding and things like that. But those are also usually the days I have time to catch up on emails, like scheduling all these things. And there's some days I look back and I'm like, I was not productive at all because I only saw 3 patients. And then I have to be like, no, you also did 5 extra hours of all this other stuff that you don't, it's not shown for because I'm not billing for it. But if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be able to do my job. So I totally relate.
So what is that? Do you think that comes from, so we talked a little bit about this too, like in our DNA, really before millennials, the white collar industry was much smaller. It was a lot more working class, a lot more factory jobs, a lot more farming, a lot more. Before this was really a lot of this stuff that's been automated. There was a lot more blue collar and a lot less white collar. And then the white collar, the executives, the managerial class, if you will, like they didn't have email on them 24/7. They didn't have, multiple devices with multiple streams of communication. And I think that has probably been, or our anxiety and our stresses and our work culture and all of that has been a product of all of those things.
Yeah. Or even just messages we got, like, I mean, you just shared messages you received about college. I received opposite messages, like you need to go to college. But if we think of work, like, how many of us have heard stories from our grandparents? So back in my day when we walked 5 miles to
uphill
work
both ways.
Yeah, uphill, but we're hearing those things. Or you think generations before us, like generations like want their kids to do better and do more. And if that's the messaging with good intent, it also instills this feeling of pressure. Like, oh my gosh, well, I saw, my dad, my grandfather, my mom, whoever raised you, getting up at 5 and going into work and working hard. So that's what I need to do. And I think it's just also societal expectations. I think society puts a lot of pressure on what a work day looks like. And exactly like you said, it's all about the output. I work with a physician who shared with it, this was probably months ago at this point, but she read a research article that talked about how if the healthcare system, like people in the healthcare system only worked 40 hours a week, there would be no healthcare system in the United States. Because there's just expectations to just produce. So I think intergenerational familial messages, I think societal messages, internal pressure of we always need to be doing something.
Right.
Like we preach especially on social media, we preach self-care, but how many of us like feel guilty when we take a break because we're not doing enough? Oh, I could be and even if it's just like for me, it's like, oh my gosh, the laundry needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be like, so even if it's not work related, we're thinking of so many other things.
Yeah, you're so right. I didn't even think about, last night I was like, I finished working and I'm like, I got to do the empty the dishwasher. I got to do laundry. I got to fold laundry. I'm like, this is awful. I just finished and I did all of it and I didn't sit down until 9 p.m. It's crazy.
I know. It is. And I think, other things to consider, I know we talked about like, finances, but like cost of living. So if people are partnered, most household has to have both people working nowadays. If you're not partnered, you're working, but then you're also like trying to pick up extra shifts, extra jobs to just survive. So that's going to be stress. So yeah, if you take time for yourself, it's like, what could I be doing? Because X, Y, and Z still has to be done.
Right.
I think there's so many factors.
So it's basically like there's never peace. There's never.
I mean, I'm sure like people listening will be like, oh, there's moments of peace. And I'm sure there's people listening that are like, I don't feel that stress, which is wonderful. I'm so happy for those people. But yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, I know you said you listened to my like AMA episode on Welcome to Group Therapy. And like somebody asked a question, like, have you ever been relaxed ever? Which is kind of a running joke. But like, really, if I was thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know the last time. And I think if we asked most millennials, especially like, when's the last time you truly felt like relaxed, calm, at peace for more than like a moment or like more than like 15 minutes or even more than a day if we really wanted to like.
Yeah.
And I would argue when we do feel that way, it's usually in unusual circumstances like, oh, we're on a vacation or things and we're like disconnected from work or things like that, even though we might be worried.
I'm curious, like if people actually do ever disconnect from work. I know I was on vacation, and when I'm on vacation, I try really, really hard to disconnect. Mm-hmm. And even if I'm going to check, I like give myself boundaries there. Like you can check for 5 minutes. If it's something that's a quick response, fine. Otherwise, like you're not opening a computer, you're not going into any other app on your phone to do something. You just got to leave it. But it is a weird thing because I don't know when I do know. I was pretty relaxed like right before filming the show. Okay. But I think it was like there was the down of COVID and then like the up of like, okay. And then I was like kind of hitting a stride and living in it and all that. And that was probably when I was at my most relaxed, but it is difficult to even imagine what that's like.
Yeah. And I think going back to this idea of anxiety, we also just don't let ourselves relax, and that relaxation can be uncomfortable and cause us anxiety. I know I've been through that. If I like feel calm, I'm like, okay, what's going on? What am I missing? What's wrong? No, exactly. Because we're just not, we're used to living in like overdrive.